Happy Wednesday. This is the CHGO Fire Podcast presented by PointsBet. Use promo code CHGO when you sign up to get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000. I'm Pat McCraney. He's Alex Campbell. It is Fire Game Day.
First Game Day pod on episode 3.
It was very convenient of them to schedule this match so that we could talk about it on this show. I think that was nice of them.
Absolutely. It just past Fire, really knowing there was going to be the show and putting more games on Wednesdays. Shout out to the schedule makers at MLS. But yes, it is Fire Game Day, so we're going to talk about a game the listeners probably don't want to hear much about. That's the lost FC Cincinnati. We're going to talk about tonight's game against the New York Red Bulls, but we do have a few news items to hit first.
Yes. Shaqiri is making $8.15 million a year, making him the highest paid player in MLS history. We found out that news yesterday. Are we surprised by that number?
I don't think so. The number, if you just told me in a vacuum, Xherdan Shaqiri makes $8 million, I think my thought is, yeah, that's about right. But when you say Xherdan Shaqiri makes more money than Carlos Vela and Chicharito and is the highest paid player in MLS history, a title that he's only going to hold for like 2 weeks when Lorenzo Insigne arrives in Toronto for a unknown number, but it's going to be something between $9 and $12 million. It's going to break what Shaqiri's making. But yeah, it's the context is what makes you turn your head at it, not the number itself.
It is not surprising to me because I figured all along here that if the Fire were going to actually land somebody of impact and of note, they were going to have to overpay. The Fire have been bad for so long that I almost feel like there's a tax that the Fire have to pay in landing some of these players, and obviously Shaqiri was the first. Now, has he lived up to the $8.15 million? I don't think so, not yet. I don't think anybody would argue that he has, but maybe there's good still to come here. But it is a good sign for me that Joe Mansueto and the Fire are willing to pay for the players they want to get.
Yeah, so Shaqiri, over $8 million. He is one of 4 Fire players who's making 7 figures. Rafa Schijos, Casper Bilcoe, Gaston Jimenez are the other 3. And again, we only find out these numbers every year when the MLS Players Association decides to release them. Sometimes it's middle of the season, sometimes it's after the season, but we get this news today. Also, speaking of making money, Chris Brady, Fire teenage goalkeeper, the one we talk less about, has signed a new deal through 2027. Brady's spending this season as the number 1 for Chicago Fire 2 in MLS Next Pro. He's also been a recent bench option due to an injury to Spencer Ritchie. So Chris Brady, 2 months older than Gaga Slonina. Yeah. This is clearly all part of the succession plan, knowing that Gaga is probably not long for this team.
Yeah, absolutely. They've said all along that they feel like Brady's going to be the long-term option and Gaga's going to go sign with some European club. Giving a guy a 5-year contract who has never played an MLS game is interesting, but it kind of feels like if they believe in their guy, I'm sure it's not a ton of money they're throwing his way. Also, of note, we, for a brief period, I think on Monday, were very confused as to why Brad Friedel was in the photos. Brad Friedel is Chris Brady's agent.
Yeah, Brad Friedel does not work for the Fire. He's not coming out of retirement to back up Gaga Slonina. Brief other note there while we're talking about goalkeepers. Gaga Slonina has been officially called in to Poland camp for the June window. We are also expecting him to officially be called in to USMNT camp. That roster probably coming next week because for some reason U.S. Soccer likes to wait as long as possible to release rosters for anything. So, again, expect to see Gaga's name on that list as well, and then it's going to be a question of which camp he decides to attend.
I thought it was a little bit funny that Poland jumped the gun and got ahead of it with throwing him on a 37-man roster that includes 5 goalkeepers. Obviously, not all of those guys are going to actually.
Yeah, it's clear what's going on here. Yeah. Poland. I mean, this has clearly been Poland's strategy the entire time. Is they're being pretty predatory with the idea of trying to capitalize Slonina. Again, though, even if they bring him, he's not going to play all 3 or 4 games that they have in this window. So maybe it's posturing. We'll have to wait and see. We may or may not hear anything from Gaga between now and when he shows up at a camp. So, again, Chris Brady, though, locked up long-term. The assumption is the Fire hope he is ready to be the number 1 whenever Gaga departs. And the other thing this does is it makes sure no one's going to come and buy Chris Brady and really screw up the plan. There were rumors this past year that Club Brugge in Belgium was reportedly interested.
There was an actual offer there, I believe, and it was a very, very, very low ball offer. offer from what I was told.
Yeah, so basically the Fire have a very clear plan in place here. Gaga will stay as long as they can keep him. Chris Brady will succeed him, and then they will hold on to Chris Brady as long as they can until he gets Gaga.
On the international choice that Gaga has to make, I had a source tell me that he would not be surprised if Gaga not only decides which camp he wants to go to, but just makes a commitment toward one of the teams. It doesn't tie him in, but he would not be surprised, this source told me, if Gaga very, very soon in the next days, weeks here, before leading up to this camp, just said, I'm going to play for this country.
Which, again, as we talked about last week, is not a decision Gaga has to make now.
Doesn't have to.
He doesn't have to make this choice this year.
Yeah.
He basically only would, maybe he'd have to make it this year, because the question is one of these teams going to bring him as the third goalkeeper to a World Cup? And if you play in a World Cup, it's over. Like that, at his age, it's one of the few things that can end that
World Cup, Gold Cup, or Nations League, or Euros final or semifinal. Isn't that right?
So it's a World Cup or a Continental Championship tournament. So that's a Gold Cup or a Euros, or we believe a Nations League, when they bring the final four teams together.
The League of Nations.
So, speaking of things overseas, Nacho Aliseda won a trophy. Lugano win the Swiss Cup over the weekend. So, Nacho Aliseda has his first piece of silverware.
I don't think he played. I think he was on the bench, as I saw.
Unused sub, but still, again, congrats to Lugano. The Joe Mansueto era over in Switzerland seems to be going swimmingly, at least so far.
Yeah, they're fourth in the league, I believe, and then they won the Swiss Cup, so congrats to them. I don't think this is sort of like the whole Lugano project in general. I don't think that there's anything here that can actually hurt the Fire. I believe anything that happens with Lugano benefits the Fire in some way. The ability to move players, just the shared scouting departments, that sort of thing. I feel like it's all a good thing, so congrats to them. We probably have a lot of viewers in Switzerland, so
of course.
Hello.
Good afternoon, or almost evening over there in Switzerland. The last piece of news we want to touch on, which is going to lead us into talking about that unfortunate FC Cincinnati game, Jairo Torres has arrived. He has made his Chicago Fire debut, a second-half sub for Chris Mueller, which is kind of then a little sad because we still haven't seen the two of them on the field together yet.
I think that happens tonight. I talked to Ezra yesterday after training, and he told me even though Jairo's listed as questionable, he should be good to go. Mueller should be good to go. Ezra seemed pretty upbeat that we were actually going to see the Fire's first choice 11 for the first time this season. That
Bilcoe upgraded to questionable.
He's the one where maybe he doesn't play because of a match fitness issue, because it's been a while since he has played, but I could see him playing too. I could see, and then Shihus, I believe, is also questionable.
Shihus also listed as questionable. Tough. That guy just needs to get through a game again without anything, and we'll talk about this more, without anything eventful happening, because he's had moments to forget in each of these last two games. And Pat, we've put it off long enough. We have to talk about it. I know, but we have to. Full time. FC Cincinnati 2, Chicago Fire 1 for the second straight week. Lucho Acosta scores a late winning goal for Cincinnati, who are now in the dizzying heights of fourth place in the Eastern Conference.
This is one of those games, Alex, that felt like a last year or a year before game, where
we have seen this movie before.
Played well, except for the times when they were really mistake prone.
The first 30 minutes especially.
Yeah,
the Fire were
the flow was there.
The Fire were the better team. I have it in our notes. The only thing that I had to complain about in the first 30 minutes is why are the numbers silver on these orange FC Cincinnati kits? It's not as bad as when Atlanta had those gold
we were both
leaf
in the press box that day, I believe, and we could not see the numbers at all.
Yeah, Atlanta, if you're not familiar, Atlanta United basically had gold leaf numbers on a white shirt. Awful. These silver numbers, not much better. Anyway, the Fire were looking pretty good. It was a balanced game, but probably 60-40 to the Fire, I would say, in terms of how things were going. And then the first goal comes, a Rafa Chihos own goal, his moment to forget this week after a red card a couple weeks ago. So basically what happens here, for those who didn't see it, is a ball gets curved in from out wide on the near side into no man's land. Gaga Slanina takes a couple steps toward it, gets called off by Chihos, and Chihos just shanks it over Gaga's head. And the big question here, Pat, is who is this goal on more, Chihos or Gaga?
I mean, for me, it's Chihos. You have to believe two things. One, there's got to be a communication issue here where maybe Gaga didn't hear Chihos or Chihos didn't hear Gaga. But it looked like that Chihos was not trying to play the ball over the bar. He was trying to play the ball back to to Gaga, and Gaga was too far forward. It loops in over him. It's got to be a communication error. I don't know which one that's on because you're not on the field hearing that, but that's one that both of those guys are going to want back for sure.
Yeah, and it's one of those moments where we talked about the previous week when there was no Schihos, and you could very much tell without Schihos and Gaston Jimenez that the youth was having problems with their communication. We're like, oh, putting those two guys back on the field solves that problem. Maybe not, because again, to your point, clearly a communication issue there. My concern with Gaga here is as soon as it's clear Gaga's not going to be the one to get this ball, he's got to retreat. He's got to go back. He's got to protect his goal line, and instead he stands there basically right on the penalty spot. And even if Schihos wins that header in the correct, even if he's able to head it forward, if that falls to a Cincinnati player, there's a lob on there. So again, the defensive issues with communication and a mix of a lot of young players involved seems to be continuing. Again, it's only Schihos' fifth game. This is a guy who had no preseason with the Fire. He basically showed up a week before the first game and went right into the starting lineup as the captain. So we're going to get to a question we were asked in the mailbag section later about how much of this is a concern and how much of this is growing pains. We're seeing some really painful growth moments for this team.
It's just it's one of those moments that feels like it only ever happens to the Fire.
Yeah.
It's just like it's going well and then you do that. And I felt like their response to it wasn't terrible either. They ended up getting an equalizer far later in the match, but and then again, there's another issue after that. We should talk about John Duran getting his first goal. He's the youngest Colombian to score in MLS history, I believe.
18 years old. Yeah. And the other note about that goal is John Duran comes on for Chino Ofor, who started this game. Is that the last time we ever see Chino Ofor start for the Fire? Because with Bilcoe getting healthy, Duran scoring his first goal, and what we've seen these last few weeks, Chino's just not it.
I had a source around the club say to me that guy couldn't trap a bag of concrete.
Yeah,
so
it's not there. Duran's got all the talent in the world if he can harness it. And he's
very raw.
I said this from the beginning of the year. Get that man striker minutes whenever possible. I'm kind of disappointed we didn't, especially with how things are going, that we haven't just seen the Fire throw him out in the starting 11 and be like, hey, let's see what happens. But it's a nice flicked header off a corner. Duran is not super tall. He's only 6 foot, but his athleticism allows him to play a bit bigger than he is. So awesome for him. I saw he was sharing on social media later. Lots of family and friends back home in Colombia watching, going crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty
awesome
cool.
moment for him. So congrats to John Duran on his first goal. But then you alluded to it, we have another problem. We asked whose fault the first goal was. This second one is basically all on Gaga, and this is a teenager looking like a teenager and just putting his defense in a terrible spot, and Lucho Acosta capitalizes.
A bad touch on the ball that comes in, and then there's like a toe poke reach that has no pace on it. Wyatt Omsberg is pretty far away. The ball's nowhere near him. Lucho Acosta capitalizes, and it's game over.
Lucho Acosta, it's very early in this season, but if you were to say who are the early candidates for MLS MVP, Lucho Acosta's in that conversation. He is playing like the player he was in that Wayne Rooney season at DC United. It's looking that good right now for the diminutive number 10 in Cincinnati, and this has been way overdue for Cincinnati fans. This is finally a team, shocking, you don't have an owner who thinks he's playing football manager running the soccer decisions anymore.
Yeah.
You bring in qualified people from Philadelphia who are one of the best-run clubs in MLS, and good things are happening. You mentioned, though, this feels like a loss from last season to the season before. Pat, we have seen so many ugly Fire FC Cincinnati games. Is this the worst, or is there context that makes this one not feel as bad as those other ones?
This is up there for sure. I mean, I would rate it probably equal to last year's loss at Soldier Field, where we thought that was the end of Wiki's time as head coach. This is up there for sure. But you know what? Going into the game, I wrote about this on CHGO. It's not a must win, right? Because it's May and MLS and things happen, but it felt like a must-win, especially considering the 3 games on the road coming up against tough opponents. And for them to play well and lose because of 2 mistakes is such a gut punch. It's just, It's tough.
Also, for the record, something we haven't really thought about or talked about, but that third game of this road trip against Toronto, it's going to be potentially the last place Fire going to Toronto at home. Potential MLS debut for Lorenzo Insigne.
Yeah, that could be it.
So, depending on how Lorenzo Insigne could take probably as long of a break as he wants, but that's probably the first game he's eligible for. He played his last home game in Naples this past weekend. Serie A ends this coming weekend, so it is possible if he wanted to jump right into MLS, he might be on the bench for that game in Toronto. He's at least going to be in the building. Yes, it just gets better.
A lot of money on the field right there.
Yeah, so the Fire do score a goal there today, in this game, but man, they still look really tame from open play. I'm not sure Casper Bilcoe coming back into the lineup fixes that. Does Duran being preferred to a 4 fix that? Are there any quick fixes for the fact that the Fire from open play can't seem to do anything?
I think having both wingers at the same time will help somewhat, but we'll see. I don't know that. Chibilko wasn't in the best form before he got hurt, so I don't know that his being there will help a lot of things. I do think, though, that Ezra, I talked to him yesterday, and he's very confident and upbeat. He's like, we haven't had our best 11 out there, and once we can stick with those guys for a while, we're gonna be fine. So, maybe he's just projecting that, but I think he really, really believes it, and so, we'll see. It's going to be a tough stretch, but we'll see. We should probably do a little ad business here, don't you think?
We probably should get to some ads. We are over 15 minutes into the show, which generally means it is time for an ad. And Pat's going to tell you about how you can support our work here at CHGO.
The best way, Alex, to support CHGO is to download the PointsBet app and use code CHGO when you sign up. If you do that right now, you'll get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000. But that's not it. If you make a $50 or more first-time deposit, you'll receive a free CHGO membership, which unlocks all of our web content, my stuff, everybody else's stuff. It's a lot of good stuff on there you really enjoy. And you'll even get a free T-shirt of your choice from the CHGO locker. That's $2,000 in free bets, a free CHGO membership, and a free T-shirt from the CHGO locker, all for making more than a $50 first-time deposit at PointsBet. If you have any questions, you can email pointsbet@allchgo.com, and we'll help you out there. Your home for live in-play betting just got even better, introducing PointsBet's new feature, Live NBA Same Game Parlay. For the first time ever, you can build the perfect live NBA Same Game Parlay only with PointsBet. Combine your favorite bets anytime during the game. You want more? You can also boost your live Same Game Parlays. Watch live, parlay live, and boost live with PointsBet. And now, online sign-up is available in Illinois. You don't have to go anywhere. You can download the PointsBet app right now and register your account from start to finish, all from your phone. So what are you waiting for? Once the game starts, don't just bet. Live your bet life with PointsBet. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700.
And of course, you can support CHGO directly. There's so much content here to check out. The Bears show just got done recording before this. Make sure you're subscribed to them and all of the great shows and podcasts here at CHGO. There's coverage of every Chicago team with new shows and podcasts every single day, plus post-game shows of big events, premium written content like what Pat does for the Fire, but we've got it for every Chicago team as well. Dope merch as well on the website, as Pat mentioned. Fire shirts are coming soon. Place your pre-orders now. You get a free shirt when you become a member, so that's another great way to get in on the great merch game here at CHGO. And you get access to the members-only Discord where you can talk shop with other Chicago sports fans in channels dedicated to each team. So check out allchgo.com for all the great stuff going on here on Rundle Place here in the West Loop of Chicago.
We seriously do have a really kick-ass team here. Like, we've got a bunch of great people from that cover all the different sports. So
speaking of kick-ass team, CHGO softball 1-0. So on to the
there
next.
It is. You play. I didn't. I couldn't play. I was home with the kids or coaching or doing something, but you played. And
I redeemed myself from a pretty embarrassing pop fly error to get 2 hits and score 2 runs, including the final of our 8 runs.
I'm proud of you. That's amazing.
My mediocre athleticism coming in handy occasionally, but also showing itself with dropping a ball that was hit like 100 feet in the air. Anyway, let's move on to hopefully better things than losses to FC Cincinnati. Tonight, 6:30 p.m. kickoff, 7:30 Eastern, out in Harrison, New Jersey. Fire against the Red Bulls. And if you're thinking, didn't these teams just play?
Yeah.
They did. Something weird happened with the Eastern Conference of MLS scheduling where everybody who played like 2 weeks ago was playing them again right away. So
it's not the first time this has happened. Like the Fire are done with Orlando City this season. They played them twice. Like yes, we are seeing the same opponents come up very quickly again.
Anyway, that last game was on April 30th. There's been some ugly Fire games, Pat. That was probably the ugliest one of the year. For one thing, it was pouring rain the whole game. It was barely soccer. John Duran and Rafa Chihos were both sent off in that game. Patrick Klimala for Red Bulls scored a winning penalty in the 90th minute to win the game. The Fire's goal on the day was a Shaqiri penalty. It was just a hideous soccer game. This is not going to be easier, though. It's on their turf at Red Bull Arena. Red Bulls are unbeaten in their last 7 games. They are tied with FC Cincinnati for 4th place in the conference. This, as we have alluded to, is the first game of a 3-game road trip. Pat, your general thoughts going into this evening?
I wrote that the FC Cincinnati game felt like a must-win because, in large part, I do not see the Fire winning tonight. I think if they could escape with a point, maybe we'll see another one of these 0-0 games. I think that'd be a very good result for the Fire tonight in Harrison because the Red Bulls are good, and right now the Fire are not. So it's going to be a difficult game for Chicago for sure.
And whoever does start at center forward tonight, whether it's John Duran, whether it's Casper Bilcoe, is going to be doing battle with a back-in-form Aaron Long, who's looking just as good as he did before all the injury problems he's had over the past couple of seasons. So that's a really tough battle. And just in general, this Red Bull team is really starting to look like a Red Bull team. Again, they've played variations of the tactics over the last few years, but this group and the way it's built up with a really young core is starting to look really, really dangerous. So, yeah, this is a tough game for the Fire tonight. Again, over the weekend, they're at NYCFC. I believe it's Citi Field. It's on a baseball field somewhere in New York. And then they go to Toronto after that.
Which could be the Insigne debut.
Again, he's going to be in the building that day, maybe not playing. I imagine he wants at least a little bit of a break. What do we want to see tonight? I think the first thing we already established is someone not named 04 starting at the 9. From a lineup end, though, do you have any thoughts of what you really would like to see the Fire do tonight?
I wonder if Ezra's feeling any need to rotate because of the game that just happened and the game on Sunday, and my gut feeling tells me is no. I think Ezra wants to get to the first choice 11 as quickly as he can. I think that means starting Chris Mueller. I think that means starting Jairo Torres. I think that means, a similar Shaqiri, Gaston, Federico Navarro sort of midfield. The question is striker. If Shabilko can go, I bet you he does, but I can't see where he's 90-minute match fit at this point, considering he's missed several games. But the back line I think is going to be largely intact. Shihus is a bit of a question mark, but I think if he can play, he will. I think that Ezra wants to get to that first choice 11 as quickly as he can, and so I think it'll look something like that. I don't see maybe there's a Fabi and Herber somewhere in there. The weird thing with the shape is that Fabi only really slots in on the wings, and he's actually maybe better at a 10 or something like that, a false 9 situation. So,
but you can't really move Shaqiri.
You're not going to move Shaqiri.
There's another thought. If Shabilko isn't ready to go, there's a scenario where maybe you don't see any striker. Maybe you see someone like a Fabian Herbers or a Jairo Torres playing through the middle centrally with something that looks a little bit more fluid with Shaqiri in behind whoever that is.
I've been interested in seeing that too. Like I don't know that you abandon the tactics at this point, but they're really not producing chances. Maybe it was at the beginning of the season a little bit, but they're really not producing chances now. I do think it's maybe time to see something a little bit different on the attack. So I wouldn't be upset to see that at all.
Yeah, and the other player I'm watching tonight for sure is going to be Gaga Slonina, who just had a birthday the other day. He just turned 18.
Yep.
Yes, Gaga Slonina was 17 until this week. Yes, we are all very old. After that performance against Cincinnati,
how does he bounce back?
But also the thing we have to think about, his name has been in the news a lot lately, and that's got to be a lot of pressure right now on a 17 turned 18-year-old. If we think a final decision on his next 20 years of his life, yes, 20 years from now, Gaga could still be playing international soccer. It's ridiculous. if that decision's coming, that's a ton of pressure. That's a lot going on. He's got to make a decision at the minimum about what camp he's going to. He's suddenly the number one for the Fire. There are $8 million transfer values being put on him. That is a lot for a senior in high school to be currently dealing with. So I think maybe we can cut him a little slack.
Yeah, and it's weird talking to him because you don't get.
He doesn't sound like an 18-year-old.
No, like when I talk to Brian Gutierrez, I feel like I'm talking to a kid who's 17, 18 years old, right? Like it's not a knock on him. No. He acts his kind of age, even though he's above that age as far as footballing talent. But like Gaga feels like you're talking to a grown-ass man. Like,
which is part of the appeal of Gaga, and I think that's part of why he gets that kind of interest, because there's you don't feel like you're signing an 18-year-old. It's not a concern of like, oh man, we got to treat him with kid gloves or really baby him when he shows up to some bigger club in Europe.
And so because of that level of maturity that he projects, I feel like maybe he's probably better at dealing with that adversity that he just went through. I mean, that was probably his worst game as a professional.
Yeah, probably.
You could say.
I mean, he's had games where there's shots maybe he could have saved, but in terms of like mental errors, that's the worst we've seen.
Yeah, and so I think that he's probably going to be fine, and we'll see. But I really, really believe in him, and he's. I was watching him yesterday in training. He looked fine. He looked himself. He looked confident and strong. So I would love to see it. It would be great for the team and great for Gaga if he could bounce back quickly.
So it is that time of the season. We're 11 games in for most teams, or you can start talking about, is anybody's seat particularly hot? If I was to say, if you look at the standings right now, Vancouver is bottom of the West. They made a play to keep Vanni Sartini at the end of last year, which is something the players and the fans wanted, but it sounded like maybe the soccer operatives in that team did not particularly want.
Yeah.
And now he's really struggling. Vancouver only 8 points this season. They're the worst team in MLS through 10 games. Sporting KC is down there in the West. Peter Vermes is going nowhere. He's not going to fire himself. San Jose just changed managers, and Seattle's 11th. Obviously, they get all the slack in the world. In the East, you've got the Fire at the bottom. Inter Miami just above them, so maybe Phil Neville's seat getting a little warm, although that team's very much in transition. Right. Toronto, New England, Columbus, Charlotte. DC already fired their manager. Should Ezra's seat be hot at all right now, or is it a case of it's so early that Ezra's job security for the season basically doesn't matter how bad the Fire were? He can't get fired this year at all.
I wrote a column on Monday about this where I was trying to, like, who do we blame here? And where do we place the blame? And I kind of came to the conclusion that, like, if you have to blame anybody, you blame Heights. But I think it's more a cultural thing that they're trying to overcome here. There's been such a cloud and such a culture of losing at this club for so long that transitioning from that to what Seattle has, where you're winning CONCACAF Champions League, is going to take some time. And I really don't think Ezra is responsible for, like, the idea to me that we would even think about firing Ezra at this point is ridiculous.
I'd agree. I think I think the question, it's a question that, like, somebody's probably thinking about. And I think it's
I've seen it. I've seen
it's
fire
worth
Ezra
discussing. But we're so early. It's so new. You talk about the first 11 hasn't been there. Ezra, how many players on this roster did Ezra Hendrickson have any say in being on this team? 3?
Yeah.
Maybe. Casper Bilcoe, Chris Mueller, and it's maybe Rafa Chihos probably. And that's about it.
Yeah.
Because that Torres decision was in the works for a while.
Yeah, I think that, as I remember correctly, when they were going through the interview process, Heights and Pelzer were asking the potential candidates what they thought of all these different players. And they were waiting on a few of them. Wyatt Omsberg, I think, and Jonathan Bornstein were 2 that they were waiting to actually make a decision on. But I think all of the managerial candidates, from what I was told, had weighed in on certain guys, and maybe he had a little bit of say before he got hired and saying, I like a Gaston or whoever it may be. But yeah, the idea that, I think, one, he deserves more time because it's going to take a little bit of time. And I know that's frustrating for Fire fans who are tired of hearing this crap from every single administration, every single manager, that is going to take time. It's going to take time because there are teams where they just show up and something starts and it doesn't take time. Colorado last year, for instance, like sometimes things happen in MLS and teams get good, and that never ever seems to happen here, which is enormously frustrating. But for if I'm singling out Ezra, he deserves time.
So we're going to kind of, I think, delve into some of those questions a little bit more in the mailbag section. But before we get to the mailbag, it is time for this week's Points Bet Pick of the Week. And I apologize if you've been following these so far because we have lost you money. Augsburg and Greuther Fürth combined for 3 goals on Saturday. Augsburg won 2-1. That doesn't happen in games those teams play in. No one scores that many goals. Fürth don't score, period. So I'm sorry, but we think we've got a bit of an American flavor this week. This is a bit with our hearts, but we do think it's going to happen as well. We're calling this the Jesse Marsch Parlay.
Do it for Jesse.
If you're a soccer fan, you will know that relegation in the English Premier League is still very much up for grabs. One of Leeds, Burnley, and Everton. One of those 3 is going down. Leeds are currently the favorites at 60% odds or so, according to 538. But their 2 challengers both have games on Thursday. You've got Burnley against Crystal Palace and Everton are against Villa. So our points bet pick of the week is that neither of those teams are going to win those games. They will both either draw or lose. So that is Crystal Palace double chance plus Aston Villa double chance, which gives you a parlay of those 2 with odds on PointsBet right now of plus 151. So I feel pretty good about that. If you look at those 2 games, Crystal Palace under Patrick Vieira, former MLS manager, have been playing really well this year. They're not just going to roll over against Everton. They're going to take some pride in trying to, win their last home game of the season.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's big for them. Aston Villa taking on Burnley. Our only concern there might be if Steven Gerrard tries to save things up for Man City to win Liverpool the title on Sunday. But Burnley's kind of taken a step back these last couple of games after the new manager bounce. So I think I feel pretty good that neither one of Everton nor Burnley is going to win outright on Thursday. So that is our points bet pick of the week. Again, download the Points Bet app wherever you get your apps, Google Play, Apple App Store, all that stuff. And you can sign up online in Illinois. You don't have to go anywhere. Makes it really, really easy. And hopefully, finally, this week, we can help you win some money. Pat, it's mailbag time.
It is mailbag time. This is my favorite point of the show, I think, where we take your questions that you throw to us on Twitter. We've got some good ones today, I think.
So this is our first one. This is from playing... Well,
let's do that one, yeah.
Yeah, sure. This is from Playing with Fire. As much as the surrounding factors for the club look to be on the upswing, what is going on in the field? Is this a culture thing? Is it more of a systemic issue? What is this team lacking to get on the right track? Is it simply a question of time? So there's a lot there, but I think where I'd start, Pat, is the Fire dug themselves a really, really, really deep hole with decisions over several years. And when it takes a long time to dig that deep, it's going to take a while to dig yourself out.
Yeah, I would say that Joe Mansueto has shown a very positive willingness to spend money where needed, whether it's pulling the team out of Bridgeview and buying out of that lease for $60 million, or paying $8.15 million to Shaqiri, or I think almost at this point doubling the amount of staff that the club has, expanding the academy, things like that. Obviously, that's going to help in the long term. He's also a guy, if you look at his business successes, he feels like a guy who, and he's told me this, he takes kind of a long-term approach. He likes working with the same people year after year and letting their vision kind of come through. It hasn't worked on the field.
No, everything. I mean, if the Fire were as good on the field as they've been off the field over the last 2 years, they'd be contending for MLS Cups. Like, that's how quick the turnaround has been on the off the field and the backroom stuff.
Because it's easy to hire the best marketing people or the best video people or the best, whatever it may be in some of the off the field.
It's an easy fix to just say, hey, City of Bridgeview, how much money do you want to get us the hell out of here?
Those are things where your money has an immediate impact, right? But like getting things right in a league where there's all these nuanced rules and you can't just Man City your way to success, even though they kind of did with their MLS team, New York City, they winning the MLS Cup. But even there, it takes a little bit of time. And yeah, there are teams that all of a sudden, Nashville has been a very good example of a team that's been pretty good from the get. But
it's a lot easier if you do it right. It is a lot easier to start from zero as an expansion team. We've seen this. Fire aren't the only team this is a problem for.
Yeah.
Teams who've dug themselves a hole in MLS.
You're almost starting from negative.
You're starting from negative where the expansion teams get to start from zero. Now, the expansion teams can obviously take bad steps early and cause themselves problems. But when you've done things a certain way for 15, Miami being a great example. When you've done things a certain way for 15 years, it's going to take time for you to get back to zero. So, again, I think it's a lot of things. I do think it might be a question of time. We have to give it more time before we know for sure. All right, next up in our mailbag segment here, we're going to go to Justin Witt. This is going to be his second time, I believe, on the show. So Justin asks, for fans, things seem to be heading in a familiar direction, but so much of the organization, as we were just talking about, has changed in the last few years. Is it really a matter of more of the same, or do fans need to acknowledge their own PTSD and pull back on the pessimism? I'd say yes and no. I think fans are allowed to be pessimistic when things are going on the field the way they have been, but I do think there's a lot of PTSD involved here with what Fire fans went through in the Nelson Rodriguez era, and so I think you do have to maybe try to provide some context for yourself, knowing the people in charge here do actually know what they're doing. It remains to be seen if that's going to work on the field, but I think the place the Fire are coming from is definitely better, if not perfect.
Yeah, I don't fault anyone for having any kind of feeling of pessimism, though, toward the club. Like it's deserved and it's warranted if you're stepping back and looking at the big picture, right? The long term here. Like it's been so bad for so long that if you feel that way, if you feel negative toward the club, you're not wrong. Like you're not that's not an unvalid feeling. But the same old Fire thing is weird to me because like it's a new owner, it's a new GM. He's had a few years and maybe he's not the right guy for the job. We'll find out. But it's a new coach again this year. There's another new logo. Most of the players are new. It's not the same old Fire. It's a different team that's still struggling. So I get the sentiment, but it's just I think also for your own mental health. Right? If you're a fan.
Yeah, take a step back because, this process, where the Fire have restarted, it feels like several times. The first year or two of this process is going to be a slog. Like, maybe next year we're seeing some things on the field that look like pretty soccer. This is going to take time. It's probably going to outlast how long Xherdan Shaqiri is on this team, unfortunately. This is going to be a process. So, again, getting wrapped up in the day-to-day in all the individual struggles. It's a 34-game season. You really can't be too hard on yourself. It's understandable. It's valid. But you really got to, be kind to yourself with how invested you get in the process of this hopefully getting better.
Hopefully we look back on all of these bad times and all of this garbage when the team is operating like Seattle and their championships, MLS Cups, CONCACAF championships. Maybe we're beating Liverpool in the Club World Cup in 5 years or whoever it may be. Newcastle, whoever it may be.
Sad.
It's hopefully it's all worth it because I think fans deserve that at this point.
You mentioned, Pat, the players have changed. Next up, we've got a tweet that comes in from @DJH2036. And he asks, at what point would you start moving bad/unreliable players out? Do you move them during the summer? Do you hope they improve and move them during the offseason if nothing else? Or do you just not move them at all? He's looking at Shaqiri, Bilcoe, Jimenez, Ivanov, and maybe 04 and Herbert. So that's a really...
There's some different opinions
let's start with players who are easy to move soon. Chino 04 I don't think is on this team next year. I think he's on, like a lot of guys in MLS, they're on year-to-year contracts. Those contracts are very easy to get out of. So I think he's a guy we probably don't see around next season. Stanislav Ivanov, I think the trial period is starting to run out on him.
Done with him, yeah.
Because the idea is he was going to be a guy you brought in from Bulgaria, Bulgarian U21 international. The hope was that you keep him around for a couple of years, he contributes, he becomes a full Bulgarian international, and then you can sell him back to Europe. Not for a lot of money, but for something. no indications right now. Like, again, even when Frankowski went to France, like, Frankowski just had that raw speed that was so ridiculous that you can use him for something even if the finished product isn't there. For the record, Frankowski has gotten better in France, probably going to go to the World Cup with Poland.
Had more goals than Messi, I believe.
Yeah, strange things have happened over there. So I think Ofor and Ivanov are in the category of, they're probably gone next year unless something upticks quickly, and those contracts are easy to get out of. The next category is a guy like Fabian Herbers, who has been a square peg in a round hole the whole time. He's a locker room guy at this point.
I will hear no Fabi slander.
No Fabi slander. He doesn't cost a lot of money. He's a good locker room guy. Right. He's a good mentor
he's
for
like
all the...
Bornstein. Why would you not want a guy like that on your team?
And he's like 5 years younger than Johnny Note. Fabi's going nowhere.
Right.
His minutes might go away, but his place on the roster isn't going anywhere.
But like I coach youth players, and I've got this kid named Beckett who will play any position I ask him happily for the team without complaint. And Fabi is that guy for the Fire. He's just what job do you want me to do today? I will do that for the team. I think every team needs a guy like him. I would not want to see Fabi go away.
So then that brings us to the three big names on this list. And we'll start with Casper Bilcoe. It's his first season on the team. He's still got a couple good MLS years left in him. He has a long pedigree. He's had injury problems. I don't think his name should be anywhere near this. I think you're going to give Casper this year. If we gave Robert Barrich 2 years, we're going to give Casper Bilcoe 2 years. I mean, come on.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that moving on. Anyway.
I have a buddy who's convinced that Casper's going to be an absolute failure.
And he may
is,
be,
but I'm not so sure. Yeah.
No, it's no. Xherdan Shaqiri was just signed for an absolute mountain of money. The Fire can't probably get out of that contract. Is that a 2 or a 3 year deal?
I don't remember. I have to look it up.
So he is locked in for at least one more year after this, making a ton of money. So like it or not, Fire fans, Xherdan Shaqiri could stink. They are stuck with that guy. So he's going nowhere.
And the thing to worry about with Shaqiri is that this year, you know full well he's extremely motivated to be good.
World Cup year.
There's a World Cup coming up that he's going to play in. The fear would be that after this year, maybe he's like, I'm just going to collect some paychecks. I don't think so. And I don't think the reason that Shaqiri has been not great this year is his fault or a lack of effort or anything like that.
No, because again, all the incentive is there.
It's just not working.
He wasn't playing in Lyon.
Yeah.
He needed to get out of there because he's basically, Shaqiri could go sit on his couch for 8 months and make the Switzerland World Cup squad. Like, that's not really the problem. It's that he was interested in playing more soccer so he's in better form for the Swiss national team. That's the whole game this year. So he's very motivated this year. Again, after the World Cup, whole different question. We won't know until then. But for this year, you kind of got to write it out. And that brings us to the last name on this list, and the name that is worth discussing, and that is Gaston Jimenez, who, as we were reminded by the MLS Players Association this week, makes over $2 million a year. And if it's me, Pat, I know he's been better. I know things have looked a little sunnier for Gaston Jimenez so far this year. If anybody this summer offers the Fire 7 figures for Gaston Jimenez, you don't even ask questions. You take the money and you run.
And I feel like that's part of the reason why they brought him back. Because had they just let him go, they wouldn't have received anything. But bringing him back, even on that figure, with the idea that maybe you sell him over the summer or you sell him...
Even if you just loan him and someone agrees to pay his entire rest of his salary, that's better than nothing.
Yeah, and so he hasn't been bad this year. I think he was in the game where he was absent a couple weeks ago. The Fire kind of felt his absence. So
because again, as we talked about coming into the season, Fede Navarro being on the field helps Gaston more than it helps anybody.
Yeah, and I feel like looking back at his 3 years here, 2.5 years here as a whole, I thought he was pretty good in 2020 on a not so good team. I thought he was really bad last year, at least bad as far as what you ask a designated player to do for you. It just wasn't there. And then this year, I think he's been okay. But the question is he a $2.3 million DP okay?
No.
Right. If he was on a TAM deal and they had another DP slot open or. Yeah,
because that's really where this comes into play, and this is where fans get curious, is if there's a way for the Fire to open up a DP slot this summer. Joe Mansueto talks a lot about wanting to spend money.
Yeah.
If you can open up a DP spot and fill it immediately, because
right.
Joe might have the money allocated to spend a huge chunk of money on someone, but he can't do it unless he can move Gaston Jimenez out of there.
Here's the deal. Would you rather have the Fire let him walk and keep that spot open, knowing that they weren't going to be able to get 3 DPs signed? Because it took them so long with Shaqiri. Maybe they weren't going to be able to get 3 DPs signed. Or
if they didn't have someone lined up to take the spot, you might as well just keep Gaston.
Right, and then sell him when you do. So that's are they working on who their next guy is going to be alongside with? Is there a place where we could sell Gaston? And if that's the case, then it was a good decision to keep him. Otherwise, I don't think he's performed to the level of a DP, but I also don't think he's been as bad as people think, except for a few, the clips on Twitter of the low-hanging fruit where he's just standing there and not defending, which those are indefensible.
The first couple games of the year, we were panicking, and he has gotten better since, hopefully better enough to command a transfer fee. All right, one more question before we get out of here. This one is from Tim, TP King _34 on Twitter. We're going to toot our own horn a bit with this last one. You guys are great at this, Tim says, enjoying the pod. If you had your choice, given where the team is, what position would you sign a U22 player in the summer? Also, as I said, there would be growing pains, so do we just all need to relax and give them time, or is this as bad as it feels? We've answered that second part. The Fire, I don't believe, have another young money spot open right now. They have 3.
I think they do.
No, they do, because one of their DPs is young DP. So they only have 2 overage DPs, which allows you to sign 2 young money players.
Right.
Jairo Torres is one of them. So, and Chris Mueller, is not young enough to qualify. So
I think Duran is one of them.
Oh, is Jairo Torres a DP?
Jairo Torres is a young.
You're right. Sorry, I got that wrong.
So
Jairo
there
Torres
would
is
be
a young
second
DP.
Slot. Yes.
John Duran is a young money signing at age 18. So there is another one of those available. What position would we sign someone in? I'm going to tie this to the last question we answered. In the universe where they get Gaston Jimenez up and out of here, I'm signing a U22 initiative center midfielder.
Me too. Yep.
Just because, is it a DP? No.
You don't need fullbacks. The back line seems fairly strong.
You've got a lot of young center backs.
You know where your goalkeepers are going to be.
Could you sign another left back for cover because Johnny's legs aren't there? Maybe. Winger. You kind of have that cover now for starters. And again, there's kids everywhere.
Yeah.
I think you'd sign another center mid. And again, in part because the current kids, most of them being teenagers, don't quite look ready for those center mid spots as of yet. So, yeah.
Or maybe a striker. Just try your hand at another striker.
Again, I think it really depends on what Shabilko's health outlook is. If he's playing and you've got Duran as a backup option, no, I'd say you go center mid. Even if you don't move Gaston, just every time either him or Navarro's got to come out of the lineup, it's a gaping hole in the center of the park.
All right, we've gone over, and the Blackhawks show needs to get in here, so we better wrap up our business here. Red Bulls tonight. Score prediction? What do you think?
3-1 Red Bulls. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on this one. NYCFC Sunday night then.
Soccer on a baseball field? Gross.
Different baseball field, though. Check out my feature. We left it unlocked on CHGO, allchgo.com. I did it about the Fire are training a bunch of community coaches. Pretty cool move by them. Next week's show is going to be on Tuesday at 12:15, not Wednesday, Tuesday, because I'm flying to Florida on Wednesday. It's just me ruining the schedule for everybody.
I'm going to ruin it the week after that. We'll provide you more details when we get there. But, so Tuesday, next week, same place, different time. We hope you can join us then. Again, Fire, play tonight. PointsBet pick of the week for Premier League games tomorrow. More Fire action on Saturday. So we will have all sorts of stuff to talk about when we see you next Tuesday. But for now, for Pat McCraney, I'm Alex Campbell. This has been the CHGO Fire Podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Adios.